We told you earlier on about a great interview we want to have with the Chief Executive for the National Petroleum Authority. And Hassan Tampoli is joining us this morning. Hassan, good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's okay. And we haven't had you in the studio since you took over your position.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember prior to that you had come to help us with some analysis, one or two. But we know that we want to speak generally about the industry, also speak about illegal fuel trade, issues about licensing, and how we can sanitize the industry as a whole. But also we'll look at the regulation of the NPA itself, the act that sets it up, whether perhaps it will need some bit of tweaking one way or the other. But let's premise the whole story with having this, that the Ghana Navy, in collaboration with the National Petroleum Authority, the NPA, and the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, they impounded 2 unregistered vessels over the weekend. The vessels apparently were impounded for engaging in illegal oil trade in Ghanaian territorial waters. And we'll bring you a story. Well, so for all the things that we have to do, we'll bring you all that in a bit. But good morning to you.
Good morning.
And thanks for joining us. But let's look at currently what the industry is and how it is. What would you say has been your observation since you came into office about how, on the downstream, we conduct activities in the industry?
Thank you very much. I think broadly, downstream is an area in the petroleum industry where I can say it's more liquid. So the money turn around real quick, and so there's brisk business all the time. And so we tend to see more activities going on there in terms of transportation, marketing, and some even have become brokers, even though it's not recognized under the law. You have brokers, you have too many middlemen, you have bulk distributors, you have, oil trading companies that deal with this international oil trading companies and so on and so forth. So it's a very busy area in terms of the marketing and business, and also very busy when you look at the safety side of things. It's also very, very important. You can't miss it. And the third aspect is also with the pricing of petroleum products, which can take a tumble or you can take a deep rise all the time. And so that is there's hardly a lull in activities of the downstream industry. Always there's something going on. And above all, there is the issue of smuggling and then dumping of petroleum products right here in the country, supposedly meant for exports. In the price build-up, about almost 45 to 48% is made up of tax. So if you get to sell some of these products meant for exports, then you get to keep the tax right in your pockets. So there's an incentive for people to be able to do so. The same thing was happening with bunkering. So that also didn't attract any taxes. And so people move away from export when we close that area into the bunkering area. So when we were able to shut out the export area, we were able to reduce exports volumes by about 97%. Now, clearly, some of those who claim to have been exporting never took anything out of the country. And when we closed that area, they moved into bunkering. And the bunkering also shot up drastically. And by the time that we got the law, there was a name, taxes to be imposed on bunkering products, the volumes had dropped from about 22 million liters to 200,000 liters. And the next thing that we see is some of these under declaration. So it's a very fluid situation in the industry. Always something new. You have to be on playing catch up all the time. But thankfully, we are automating a lot of our, processes. And with that, we are able to catch some of these guys who try to beat the system and then take advantage. So if we don't catch you today, we'll do a quick railback review, confirm volumes, and do reconciliation, and we'll definitely catch you.
And when we always talk about the National Petroleum Authority, the ordinary man's mind is always on petroleum prices, how upward or downward the adjustments usually are. But in reality, it is because you have some collaboration with the existing players. There could be the OMCs, the BDCs, etc. What sort of collaboration is there? What sort of improvement do we need in that to help in your work of supervision?
What happens in especially in the pricing area of the petroleum products is that so there are three basic components that determine the price of petroleum products. So first of all, you look at the FOB price, free on board, price on the international markets, and then secondly, you look at the exchange rates, and then thirdly, you look at the taxes, levies, and margins. Now, by and large, taxes have seen some reduction. Special petroleum tax has seen a reduction by about 5% from 17.5% to about 12%. Now that is significant. Above all, the special petroleum tax has now been removed as a percentage in the price build-up to a specific amount. So normally what happens is if there is a change in the price upwards, because it's a percentage, it compounds the price. But if it's a specific amount, then whatever the price is, then it doesn't impact more on the consumer. So that is significant for the consuming public. Then you move from the taxes, which like I said, have seen reduction. Then you go to exchange rates. The CD has been fairly stable as far as the dollar is concerned, and in some instances make some significant gains against the dollar. So that also has given us some amount of cushion. What we do not have control over is the price on the international market, which can really change depending on the international dynamics. It can change when the rhetoric between Donald Trump and what's the name? The rocket man starts exchanging words.
Putin
and the North Korean leader.
Yeah.
In fact, exactly. Prices can change just because of
some of
the rhetorics that fly across. And even the war in Syria can even lead to change in prices.
And his relationship and the rest of the West with the Middle East. Yeah.
Even the arrest of some Saudi, princes and all of that had also an impact. Hurricanes here and there also have impacts on the prices. So those ones we don't have control. OPEC can decide to cut production, and then it also have an impact on the price of petroleum products. So what we do is to be able to mitigate some of these impacts by adjusting the price stabilization and recovery levy in the price build-up, so that when the prices stabilize, then we restore. When prices go up, then we are able to reduce, at least in order for us to be able to stabilize. So by the next pricing window, price stabilization and recovery levy would probably come to zero, so that the impacts that should have been on the price will be minimal. So if you look at it, we've been doing fairly well.
Well, I do understand that. I'm just reading something, and this from just on Friday, from the Institute of
Energy Security.
Yes, energy security, as well as the IFS. And they have indicated that in the next pricing window, or in the next 2-3 months in quarters, we're likely to see a 2% jump in prices. And I know that some of the indicators they gave were because of the relatively unstable prices in the world market.
Yeah.
For you as a regulator, what would be your response to that, to such projections?
The new prices should have taken effect from yesterday, but because of the deployment of the price stabilization and recovery levy, I do not think there will be any increases in the prices at the pump. So like I said, there's 12 pesos in the price builder for petrol, and then 10 pesos in the price builder for diesel. That consumers are not going to pay in this pricing window, and that has seen a reduction. As a matter of fact, LPG should reduce by about 1.2 something percent, and then diesel should come down by 0. something percent. Petrol should still remain 0.24%, which is almost negligible. So normally the OMCs will not, touch their prices because of 0.2%. So we are good. I believe as it is right now, consumers will still go to the pump and then pay the price that they've been paying for the past 2 weeks.
As a regulator, do you usually have to concern yourself with issues about legacy debts, perhaps also within being inherited from the industry? And then also, how do you deal with that with the Oversight Ministry and whether the BDCs or the OMCs?
The legacy debts have become part of the industry's problem, and as a regulator, we have to be concerned. We have to be concerned because the books of the BDCs have to look good. And if they have these huge debts in their books, they are unable to raise LCs, and then that becomes a problem in terms of supply and delivery of products into the country. Now, what that means is that you have these big oil trading companies, international oil trading companies, bringing in products almost in tank, and sometimes bringing to sell directly to OMCs. Sometimes they try to do, or to sell to the BDCs even in the country. Now that has significant impacts because they would have taken out all the BDCs in the space and assumed direct, responsibility to sell to now. Because of downstream local content issues, they are not allowed to come into the country unless there's 50% equity participation by a Ghanaian, indigenous Ghanaian, in those businesses. So what government has done, and government is continuing to do, is to absorb some of these debts by the floating of the ESLA bond, which by and large has wiped away a lot of the debts of the existing BDCs. Some of them are back on their feet and they're doing BRICS business now. What is still left is validation of the forex losses that the BDCs put in, and the claims are being validated by, I believe, Ernst & Young. As soon as that is done, that will also be paid, and I believe they will be very firmly on the ground to do BRICS business.
And follow up to that, I'm just reading a story on City FM Online, and that same story also has been replicated by way of publication on myjoyonline.com on March 15, and of course it's being attributed to the Chamber of Petroleum consumers as well, and then also with Senor Husi, who is with the BDC, so to speak.
Seaboard.
Now they are saying the legacy debts critically are a concern for them as importers, and sometimes makes it difficult for them to raise their LCs as well. What I want to know from you, how much is there as legacy debt currently that we as a country we need to deal with?
So government doesn't have its own figures. What we have is claim from the BDCs that this is how much we are owed, especially with the BDC space. Now that is what government is still validating by the use of this audit company, Ernst & Young. So we will not be able to make any conclusive statement at this stage until Ernst & Young is done with.
When you assumed office, which figures were being supposedly claimed or speculated by the players on the other side?
I think it's something in the region of 2 billion cedis. And that's just for the BDCs. We are not talking VRA debts, we are not talking TOR debts. TOR debts alone as at June 2016 was about $620 million. Now, part of it was also floated as bonds, I think about 200 million or so. But by and large, we are looking more at the BDCs, and then the TOR debt is also being factored into the whole equation. Some new debts are coming up here and there. We are still validating, like I said, and it's difficult at this point to be able to say that this is the amounts that we are supposed to pay, or we are supposed to honor, or the bills that have been submitted by the BDCs. Ministry of Finance is still
reconciling.
We are reconciling.
Okay, so for you, if the OMCs, the BDCs, they work efficiently, it also improves the industry, is that not it?
As a matter of fact, post July 2015, the downstream industry has been completely deregulated. So the reason for all these under recoveries was because of the subsidies. So government says bring in products, you bring in the products at $10, and then government says you sell it at $8, I'll pay you the $2. That is no longer the case. That is no longer the case. You bring in the products and then you sell, you recover. So there's full cost recovery. Government is no longer accumulating any bills. So by reason of that alone, I'm not sure we are going to have any situation in terms, and that's one of the reasons why you haven't had any problem with the shortages of petroleum products. And I believe very strongly that one of the biggest achievements that we have chalked as an industry is the product availability. We take that for granted all the time, but you look around places like Nigeria, oil gens, Nigeria, sometimes the shortages and the queues that forms up at the filling stations is something that we haven't faced in this country since January last year. And that's partly because we let the market flow. The market flows and we're able to pay some of these debts, and then there's always availability of products. Yeah.
ESLA, the bond,
That's
and
right.
we know that the debts, we have to defray them, etc. But the argument about ASAP has always been, as well as other critics of the pricing regime at the time, let's say a year or two ago, was that we could do better. If you look at the pricing component, could we still do better with the pricing component, even though we've seen some significant reductions?
If you say pricing component, are you talking about the price build-up?
In terms of the build-up, at the end of the day, what the consumer pays at the pumps.
Okay, now that I believe is still open for debate, but in my view, what we have is most efficient. Now, the price of petroleum products, in the price build-up, you find the ex-refinery price, and then you now go through the levies and then the margin and the statutory margins. Now, almost everything that we have in the price build-up now is very, very important. Take, for instance, the PDM margin, the primary distribution margin. Now, the primary distribution margin is responsible for the payment of the costs of moving the products from the coastal depots to the inland depots. And it doesn't really matter which part of the country that you live in. If you are buying at a filling station, OMC filling station in Accra or Hamili or Paga or Elubo, the price is the same. Now, match that with the price of cement. It's different in Tema, and then there's also something added onto it when you get to Nsawam, you get to Kumasi.
Because of various indicators.
Precisely. So you pay the cost of transportation. But in the price of petroleum products, that is being factored into the. So those who live far are being subsidized by those who live near, and that's how it has been for some time. So that's what the primary distribution margin does.
That's why the pricing regime, in terms of what the rates are equitable,
exactly.
so to speak.
So that's for the primary distribution margin. It is supposed to deal with the primary movement of products from coastal depots to inland depots, from Tema to Kumasi or from Tema to Bupe, for instance. Then you have the UPPF margin, and that's the Unified Petroleum Pricing Fund margin. Now, when you take the product, for instance, to Kumasi depot, you are supposed to move now to various filling stations, some to Bekwai, some to Ejura, you take some to Obuasi, and so on and so forth, and even some to stations which are very close to the depot. Now, that is the equalizing factor. Regardless of the distance, the price is the same. Regardless of the distance, the price is the same. The first one is the movement from the coastal depot to inland depot. Now, UPPF deals with the inland depots to the various filling stations. That is also factored into the price build-up. Now, I don't think that one we can take away that from the pricing build-up. The marketer, which is the OMC, also needs to sustain itself and then keep being in business. So there is a margin for the marketer. Now, all these monies doesn't come to government, it doesn't come to MPA. PDM goes to the transporter, UPPF goes to the transporter, marketer's margin goes to the OMC. There's a dealer's margin, which goes to, for instance, if you have made enough savings and you want to do a filling station, you go and see Guel, for instance, and then they partner with you. Now, as a dealer who has made some investment, there's need for you to get some returns on your investment. You are also entitled to something. So it goes to you. It doesn't come to government, for instance. Then you have, what's the name? Fuel marking. We have this fuel marking to be able to determine the tax liability of various oil marketing companies, and to also check on the quality and so on and so forth. That is also in the price builder to ensure that we consume quality fuel. And mind you, Ghana at the moment in the entire West African sub-region is the only country that is doing 50 ppm, the cleanest fuel ever in the West African sub-region. You have others doing 10,000 ppm, 5,000, 3,000 ppm. So with that, we are able to sanitize our air and then make sure that even some countries that don't consume 50 ppm come to Ghana to buy for their mines and for some other industries within their country which require these quality products. So you have all these things in the price builder. Then you have the road fund levy, which is a necessary evil. I mean, we must maintain our roads, and it is not just in Ghana, it's in a lot more countries that you have all these road funds. So all these things are very important in the price buildup. You take out one and you probably will create some dislocation in terms of what it was supposed to be. Now, if you take out the UPPF margin, then some people have to pay more, others will pay far less, and so on and so forth. So everything that you see in the price, we've been doing an audit of the price buildup, and the more that we do, the more that we get convinced that whatever it is that we find in the price buildup is a very, very important call. For instance, in Ghana, the tax in the price builder is about 45 to 46%. In the UK, I believe it's about 65%. And notwithstanding that we have 45%, our price is far cheaper than almost all the countries in the entire sub-region apart from Nigeria. And that's also because Nigeria, they pay subsidies. And that's about 50%. If they weren't paying subsidies, Ghana would have been the cheapest in the West African sub-region. So we are good. I think we are in a comfortable lead.
Now, when it comes to the downstream, we the consumers have to deal with the various OMCs. And so, because it's deregulated, the pricing is supposed to be as evenly competitive as it can be. But what would you say about the concerns that have been raised by consumer groups that in order for some other companies to compete, the prices are pegged so low, but it also has a certain influence on the quality of fuel that they're selling? Because understandably, some of the
adulterate
and all that. How do you check that?
Yes,
how do you assure the consumer that well, the lower the price, perhaps it will still mean that the fuel is as effective or as qualitatively as it should be?
That's a very important question, and that's a question that we've also been asking ourselves on almost an ongoing basis, and then we'll find solution for them. In fact, some of the solution is even finding expression in some change in the MPA Act and some regulations that we are bringing up. When you go and engage in some amount of adulteration, the sanction regime not it again. Think of 500 cities. So that's about 10,500 cities for each adulteration that we determine that we have engaged in. Now, I don't think that is deterrent enough. So we are in the process of amending the law to make it even more deterrent. Now, what happens is that the proposed amendments, if you adulterate or dilute for the first time, the quantity of the adulterant, you will be made to pay the tax on it, number one, and pay 5% of the tax penalty on it. That's number one. Now, when you do it the second time, you pay the tax component and you pay a penalty of 10% on the tax that you should have paid. On the third occasion, you lose your license. We'll revoke your license and then we'll close down the station. That is a sanction regime. And the government will take over your property and then run.
You intend doing that?
That is what we intend to do.
What timelines have you given yourself on that?
We have up to the end of the year to do that.
That's a long time.
No, I mean, it's
we would have been consuming.
We have to go through the regulatory process, go to Parliament, get an amendment of the law, and so on and so forth.
Knowing that your actions will be backed by law.
Precisely.
We don't want to do anything illegal. And as a result of that, there's been great collaboration with the Ghana Navy and then the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority. So there was an impound of 2 unregistered vessels over the weekend, and the vessels were impounded for engaging in illegal oil trade in Ghanaian territorial waters. And please make sure that you watch this. When we come back, we'll be asking Mr. Hassan Tampoli how his authority hopes to clamp down on some of these illegal products that come onto the market, and as a result, make some of the OMCs and their business a bit uncompetitive.
Both the 2 ships, MT Mami Mary and MT Matrix 1, were arrested yesterday in Tema at about 4 p.m. following intelligence gathered. Preliminary checks reveal the crew on board were Nigerians. However, the identity of one of the ships does not correspond to documents covering it. MT Mami Mary was said to be transferring fuel of about 320 metric tons to another ship, MT Matrix 1. Commodore Issa Yakubu indicated that the crew on board did not follow protocols when it comes to ship-to-ship transfer of fuel.
Before these activities take place, certain protocols have to be followed, but we suspected that the necessary protocols had not been followed, so we pursued them, and they are now under arrest. One ship has just been brought in, and the other is on its way into harbor. Of course, this is just the beginning. We are yet to do detailed investigation to find out the actual quantities.
Meanwhile, Acting Chief Executive of National Petroleum Authority, Al-Hassan Tampoli, says the necessary investigations are being done.
Each agency is going to now carry out their...
Well, so the Chief Executive is here himself. And we spoke to Senyo Hosi, the CEO of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. And the concern he had was that the authority and even people in high places know about some of these illegal activities because Ghana's waters are vast. They are patrolled by the Navy, even the police in some instances. And we can't say we can't see these large vessels or ships. What do you say to that? We're aware of these illegal activities and they come into onshore and they just spoil the competition for those who want somehow to obey the law strictly.
I think that in terms of these happenings on in our territorial waters, this particular one happened, I believe, within 12 nautical miles of our territorial waters. Now, that part is considered part of the land, the 12 nautical miles by international law of the seas. 12 nautical miles. So they were virtually sitting on our land and then engaging in an illegal bunkering until intel was picked and then the Navy moved in. And I want to commend the Navy for the yeoman's job that they have been doing. As a matter of fact, only yesterday, they also brought in 3 vessels from the western side to dock at the Takoradi Harbour, also engaging in illegal businesses. Now, there are 2 things. First of all, when you engage in some of these bunkering activities, it depends on where you are doing it. If you are doing it within the 12 nautical miles, that means that you are supposed to pay the taxes, and then you need to have been regulated by the MPA. If you proceed to do it within 24 nautical miles, that's within the contiguous zone, our tax laws are still triggered. When you go beyond 24 nautical miles, then you are in the exclusive economic zone.
So what do they? They mean they do bunkering there illegally.
So they do illegal bunkering there, and so that's what is happening. So the Navy was able to engage in hot pursuits, and they were able to get these guys who were also within 67 nautical miles, I believe, in our territorial waters. So by the weekend, we had impounded almost 5 vessels carrying various quantities of petroleum products in the western region. 1 vessel was carrying over 8,000 metric tons. MT Mami Mary was carrying 320 metric tons.
It was from Nigeria.
It was from Nigeria, entire crude from Nigeria. The other one, MT Matrix 1, carrying over 3,000 metric tons of crude oil. And that one had almost all the crew was Ghanaian, except the captain, who was a Pakistani. Now, we take a very serious view of some of these situations, not just because of the bunkering. But we do not want Ghana to be a destination for stolen product or for goods gotten from pirates. It cannot be. So it has to be a very high-risk business, and that's how come you have all this heightened, activity by the Navy, Ghana Maritime Authority, GPHE, and the MPA dealing with that situations. Above all, this is being coordinated by the national security, and I think by and large we've been very successful at it. Now, that is just one side of it. The other side, which is done almost along the entire coastal stretch, is that products are brought in from offshore Lomé, where we have more or less the warehouse for petroleum products in West Africa, and the bulk is broken into smaller vessels. They now come all the way down, and then they break the bulk into canoes. And the canoes, some of them have compartment big enough to carry 120,000 liters. That's almost over 2 times this huge bulk road vehicles that you see on the road. 2 of their loads can fit into those canoes, and then they can still take more. They bring them very close to the shore, and then they pump into waiting trucks. And that is a dangerous one. I did not remind you that our coastal lines somewhere along the line are a bit porous. So together with connivance of some oil marketing companies and some transporters, obviously they use the trucks. So they engage in some of these activities. But more and more, we are arresting some of them. We arrested some recently at Pong, about 2 outboard motors, 2 vehicles, and almost 200 of these gallons that we call Kufuor gallons were confiscated by the national security. On the same Saturday that we were in Tema, we were also coordinating the arrest of some trucks which had loaded supposedly for the mines, and then they ended up being brought to Accra. So they were intercepted around Weja. Now all these activities, they
load from
the western region, and supposedly for some mining companies in Takwa and Bogoso, and then they headed down straight to Accra because somebody didn't record them for the tax purposes, and so there was an incentive for them to bring to Accra and then sell to anybody, and so on and so forth. So these illegal activities have been ongoing, but we are very much. But
the fuel, whether traded illegally or not, is quality fuel to be used by.
It's quality fuel. Normally, when we arrest them, we first of all test the fuel to be sure that it accords with our local specs. If they do, then when we confiscate, we either give them to the security agencies or we give them up to Goel to sell, and the process is sent to the consolidated fund.
The last year we had this massive gas explosions around, and subsequently the thoughts from the MPA was that we're going to have proper regulation of the cylinders that are used, and even the bulk ones, etc., that are used for commercial purposes.
Right.
How far have we gone with that?
Yeah, so following the 6th October gas explosion, there was a cabinet meeting held on the 12th of October, and after that meeting, some directives were sent out, and I believe we call them the 9 commandments. And one of them, significant one in particular, is rolling out the cylinder recirculation model, which we are on course. So subsequently, we received directives from the Ministry of Energy. We put up an implementation committee. We have 3 subcommittees to deal with pricing, commercial issues, and another committee to deal with regulation issues, and the other committee to deal with health, safety, and security issues. All together, we've put up a report, and I believe we'll put the licensing framework before the NPA board this week for consideration and then possible approval. As soon as that is done, the licenses will be granted, and then I believe some companies have already acquired land. Some have even gone to tender to start the bottling facilities, and so on and so forth. So some are ahead, knowing that this policy is coming. They are standing in readiness to take full advantage of it, and we are very encouraged by the reaction and the level of interest from the business community and those in the downstream petroleum industry. Companies such as Ghana Gas, Fuel Trade, Cyrus, Goel, and other private companies, and I believe even Sage have all put in requests to do the cylinder bottling plants, and we are very encouraged by what we see. We are very much on course. Hopefully by the end of the year, we would have had some bottling plants in operation and would have met the timelines.
How many companies approximately do we have undertaking trading as OMCs?
OMCs, we have about 102.
Why?
There are just too many because it's a liberalized environment, and people have economic rights under the constitution and so on and so forth. When they meet the parameters for the grant of license, you can't say
There's
no.
nothing you can do about it.
You can't say no, so we give them.
So we have a number of them around.
Precisely. We have about 100.
You know the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. It's headed by one Duncan Amount.
That's my very good friend. I think I've seen his
he just gave you a text. Okay. So he's also a good friend too. He gives us messages once in a while. He has the chamber itself, I won't say him, the chamber has a problem with the BOST MD. You're saying he's incompetent, he's destroying BOST, and the last message that he gave, it's actually a statement, I won't say a message, that would be personal, and that your institution, the president and the ministry must be vigilant on the way BOST is being managed.
Well, I think that there's no secrets that the MD of BOST and the head of the COPEC, Duncan Amwa, are really not very good friends. So sometimes when one says something of the other, then you take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, to say that the gentleman is incompetent, I think is taking it too far. You can question his judgment on some issues. But to generalize and say he's incompetent, I think it's a bit unfair. He's working under very pressing conditions, and I think he deserves to be given a lot more space to operate. So we as regulators do not normally get involved in the internal operations of companies beyond what we think would impact negatively or positively on the market, and we do not look at whether somebody is competent or not. We look at the operations of BOST, and I think since January, February thereabouts, when we took office, we've been working very closely with BOST to make the industry, really.
There was one particular question that he asked in one of the statements. He says, BOST in the past received its cargoes on an open account basis, and this is available for verification from suppliers. And the chamber was asking why suppliers were not trading with BOST today, even though they were trading smaller volumes with smaller BDCs in Ghana, and why not BOST with all the volumes and infrastructure available at its disposal?
I think BOST is also challenged in a way because of some of the debts, and you mentioned the legacy debts. BOST is also very much involved in some of these legacy debts, not less than $400 million as far as BOST debts is concerned. Now, that immediately will put any supplier on inquiry. If a company or an MD inherits this amount of debts, definitely before you'll be able to, they will raise some issues about your financial viability before they make the facility available to you. I think that so far as we are concerned, once BOST is able to do what it is primarily, set up to do, break the bulk, store and transport, we believe that the mandate of BOST is being achieved. Trading is just, an aspect of their operations which has been put just to stabilize the market. But by and large, the primary objective of BOST to store products and to be able to transport them from depot to depot. And if we have products in Paga, we have products in Bekwai, we have products in Sefiwiaso, and we have products in Hohoi, I think we have to thank BOST for some of those.
So there's no truism in the concerns of the chamber, that's COPEC, that BOST has, over the past 6 months, not been able to deliver a single drop of oil to the country's supply of stock, and that just the impression is being created.
Well, that for me is a statement of fact. Since I believe September last year, BOST has not brought in any products. And the point that I'm making is that BOST is not set up.
You've made that point. That
set up to
they
trade.
Need to have
Precisely. It's not set up to trade.
Besides, if you want to trade, you need to have good accounts.
Precisely. If you want to do that, then that's fine. But you need to have something.
It has to be on a very good balance sheet.
Precisely.
As the finance people will say.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of the day, you're satisfied with the output of the BOST MD, despite all the concerns being raised by the consumer group?
Yeah, he's working under very challenging, circumstances, and I believe that he needs some support from all of us, from even COPEG. They have to engage the BOST MD. I engage COPEG, I engage almost everybody, I engage tanker drivers, I engage tanker owners, even the mates. Every now and again, you have to meet them to, and to be able to understand some of their challenges in the industry. So I think they should engage some more and not trade, words across the table. It's better for them to have a conversation. And I think that I've even spoken to COPEG, I believe, last week. And so every now and again, we talk about industry issues. Our doors are open. I think they should open that line of communication with the BOST MD as well.
I grew up and lived close to Ashaiman. And Tema, I know, is a hub for what we call Billy in the industry. It's illegal tampering and trading of fuel and mixing of fuel at the downstream level. How are you looking at that sort of trading? Because at the end of the day, they end up in the tanks of consumers.
They do. We have noticed that there are about 36, illegal operating depots in Tema, Pon, Ashama areas.
And if you say depots, they are like mini tanks.
They are like some storage and
facilities.
They do blending. And some of them, they do blend for manufacturing companies and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of them are not licensed. What we are seeking to do is to get the security agencies to support. Now, some of these places...
Why not license them?
Now, they do not meet the minimum requirements for the license to be granted. And then what you do is to get them to operate in a very safe and serene environment. Now, you license them and the circumstances are the same, and then something happens, really, you're going to be, worried that you license this facility even though they don't meet all the safety parameters. So we had a meeting, I think sometime last year, with some of them, with the hope that they'll be able to bring up their operations up to a certain acceptable level so that we'll license them and get them to operate in a very legal way. But as it is right now, some of them are operating illegally. We have conducted some raids there before, and the rest, I won't be able to put it out there because we are still doing some work with the security agencies in the fullness of time.
We'll see how that goes. We have to wrap up our conversation, though. It's been a great time. The next fuel adjustment announcement will be when?
It should have happened yesterday. Yesterday being the 16th, the second window for the month of April should have started yesterday. But like I said, because we have neutralized the price stabilization and recovery levy, there isn't going to be any increase in petroleum prices. And I guarantee consumers that prices most likely will remain the same at the pump.
Even for the next window?
For the next
window. Which will be at the end of the month?
Precisely.
Okay, thank you very much. Hassan Tamboli, we've enjoyed the conversation with you. He is the Chief Executive for the National Petroleum Authority. And we hope that as consumers, you've also been given some security and some assurances as far as the downstream level, how the product that you put in your car or the car that, of course, you bought daily is done or assured.